Longhorns in the 2010-2011 season, it started off very well. They looked very good for the first 3 quarters of the season, but once again, Texas swoons at the latter part of the year, and Texas comes up not only just a little bit short, but disappointingly short, this time unfortunately losing by only 1 point to Arizona in the round of 32, the second round of the NCAA tournament, losing 70-69, and Texas once again finds themselves out of a deep tournament run. For the Longhorns, though, at the same time, even though it's a little bit disappointing, 28-8 is certainly nothing to be disappointed about, and the fact that Texas went 13-3 this year in conference play, certainly nothing to be ashamed of if you're a Longhorn fan. Certainly, the ending could have been better, but let's face it, after last year's disappointing finish, where Texas just lost, I believe, 10 out of their last 17 games and went 24-10 in that stretch. Remember, last year Texas started off the season with 17 straight wins. Texas could only muster up 7 more wins at the end of the year. To have this team play a little bit better this year shows how much they improved. They had their moments, though, when they didn't look as good, but still, there was a lot of positives to take out of this season. Let's go over some of those positives that Texas had in the 2010-2011 basketball year. Let's start off first with the defense and the fact that Texas looked very good defensively all year long. You compare what they did defensively this year, where Texas was ranked 32nd in scoring defense, only giving up 62 points per game, and in fact, in terms of field goal percentage, Texas was only giving up 38 shooting-wise from other teams, 38%, good for 6th in the nation. You compare that to other years, even last year, Texas was 216th in the nation in total defense with 70 points per game giving up against opponents, and then 2 years ago in 2009, Texas was 111th in defense with 65 points given up per ball game. And in fact, you can even go back a little bit further. Texas in 2008 was 82nd in defense when they gave up 64 a little bit less than 65 points per game. So for Texas, it was a huge improvement in 2010 and 2011 defensively. They played better, they looked better, and they certainly at least gave and showed some levels of improvement and levels of comfort for Texas fans seeing that. Another good key we can kind of touch on in terms of their positives, rebounding and the inside presence. So for Texas, the rebounding was outstanding. Texas, in the rebound department, they were 5th in the nation. They averaged about 40.5 rebounds per ball game, offensively and defensively. Their inside presence was absolutely great. You got to credit the senior Gary Johnson as well as his freshman counterpart Tristan Thompson for what they did most of the year in boxing out opponents and making sure that they grabbed the rebounds in most of the key situations that they played in this past season. So give credit to Texas on that front. A great job by Texas to play a little bit better on the inside. Last year they played okay on the inside, but they didn't look quite as strong as they did this year. So give credit to Rick Barnes and his coaching staff for making that happen. Another topic we could talk about, and the last topic I'll talk about here for the positives for Texas, is just the fact that Texas played more as a team in 2011. Last year, Texas didn't play like a team. And for those who watched Texas's decline in 2010, especially the latter part of the year, especially when they lost to Wake Forest in the NCAA tournament game, Texas did not look like a team. They looked like a bunch of collective individuals who didn't really want to play as a team. They were all playing for themselves. Guys like Avery Bradley, guys like Damian James and Dexter Pippen. Those guys were very good players, but they didn't really want to play as a team. They were all more or less kind of focused on their own personal agendas. This year, not so much. Texas came out and played like a team. They were led by Jordan Hamilton, Tristan Thompson, Gary Johnson, and as well as a couple of other key players like Doja Balbay and Corey Joseph. All of those guys kind of gelled together, and they looked like a team, and I know I keep saying that, and I keep reiterating that, but Texas looked better this year. They were not as selfish. They were not quite as all me. They were team this year. So once again, give credit to Rick Barnes. He saw that last year. He saw that that team last year was so focused on themselves, they weren't really focused on that team-oriented goal. This year, Texas played a little bit better. Texas improved on that goal, and they played more as a team, played more cohesively in the 2011 season. Those are the positives, and they're all good positives. But let's kind of look at the other side of the coin and what Texas will have to work on going into next season. For Texas, there were a couple of really big negatives, and some negatives that have actually, I guess, accrued and gotten worse over the last couple of years. We'll start off with offense. And for those who have watched Texas previously in the last couple of years, this was a bit of a shocking development, especially when you see players on the court like Tristan Thompson, Corey Joseph, and Gary Johnson on the court this year. The fact that Texas's offense was not very good at all. Scoring offense, yes, Texas scored points. They got 37 points, they were ranked 37th in the nation, scoring 75 points per ball game. But the thing is, for Texas, field goal percentage-wise, they were only hitting 45% from the field, and three-point-wise, from the three-point line, Texas was 224th in the nation, barely making 5 three-pointers on the year on average per ball game. Texas was just not clicking at all offensively in certain ball games in the year, specifically against UConn in the ball game back in January. Texas, in the key moments of that ball game, just couldn't quite hit their shots. And then, of course, in the latter part of the year, when Texas lost to Kansas State, Nebraska, and Colorado, Texas's offense also struggled. And then against Kansas in the Big 12 championship game, and of course against Arizona in their final game of the season when they lost in the tournament, Texas's offense fell asleep, and they just could not reawaken themselves back to their former selves. And it was a big shock for, I think, a lot of people that saw Texas's offense decrease from last year. Last year, Texas's scoring offense was 6th in the nation, 81 points per ball game they scored, and from the field, Texas was 39th in the nation, hitting about 46% of their shots from the field. It was just a big shock for a lot of people, big surprise and a big disappointment that all that talent that was on this team and all this talent that was offensively oriented, the fact that they just could not cohese themselves enough to make those shots when it counted in the clutch parts of those ball games. Another key stat that we can throw out there about negatives is just free throws would be the next point Texas really has to work on. And the thing is, for Texas, this free throw problem has been a problem for a long time. Texas in free throw shooting this last year, Texas in 2011, the Horns were 277th in free throw shooting, 65% from the stripe. That's pretty bad. When you compound that with the fact that Texas last year was 313th in the nation, shooting 63%, the year previous in 2009, Texas was 241st, shooting 66%. It just speaks volumes of how bad the free throw situation has gotten for Texas. Texas, in the past 3 years, they've averaged about 230 in terms of the rankings in the NCAA. 230 out of 330 so odd teams. Texas's free throw shooting has gotten really poor. Not sure why. It could be coaching. It could be the fact that players are not really mentally prepared to be on the line. And it could just be that Texas right now is just not having players that are really ready to shoot from the free throw line. And when you kind of look at Texas's free throw shooting back as far as 2003, the year Texas went to the Final Four, Texas in free throw shooting, 77th, they were making 72% of their free throws. Texas has been able to shoot free throws well in the 13 years that Rick Barnes has been as the head coach of Texas. For some reason, the last 3 years, Texas just has been so poor in shooting free throws. And finally, once again, the late season swoon. Texas, for the second straight year, the Longhorns fall apart at the end of the year. Not really sure why. And I think that's the most troublesome sign for this program right now. The fact that Texas can't muster up enough strength towards the latter part of the year to save themselves. This might be on coaching. I'm not sure why this is happening for Texas and why Texas is having this happen so much. But this might be a coaching problem. Texas might be having this issue where Coach Rick Barnes might not be motivating these kids enough to play harder and play better at the end part of the season. That's one of those things where it's going to be difficult to fix because there's so many attributes and so many players in a team that you have to work with individually to get better at playing harder at the end of the year. It could be conditioning, it could be something else. But regardless, it's a bad sign for Texas, the fact that they've had 2 straight years and they fumbled at the end of the year. If they can fix it next year, Texas will be in better shape. But as it stands right now, 2 straight years, 2 straight swoons. So, finally, the final question is, what does Texas do from here? Where do the Horns go from here? How do they move on to the 2011-2012 season, learning from what they have over these last 2 years? Well, let's kind of ask a couple of questions. Who's going to stay and who's going to go? There's a lot of rumors floating around that Tristan Thompson, Texas's star center star forward, I should say, he's actually leaning towards leaving to the NBA. As also Corey Joseph and maybe even Jordan Hamilton, the 3 young players in Texas's squad right now that are supposed to make up the core group of players that are going to play or could play next year on this Longhorn program. So, once again, it's just that question. Who's going to stay and who's going to go for this Texas program? Regardless of who comes in on this next recruiting class, if Texas can't keep those 3 guys on the 40 acres, they're going to have serious problems. And secondly, can the coaching philosophy change? Coach Rick Barnes has done a great job in his 13 years. In fact, there's no reason why he shouldn't be commended for it. 12 straight tournament appearances. A lot of coaches would be jealous of what he's doing. A lot of coaches can't even get 2 straight years into the NCAAs. The problem for Rick Barnes, though, can he change his philosophy enough to allow his team to get better at playing late in the year and just play better as a whole? Right now, Coach Rick Barnes is not quite doing well enough, and especially in the eyes of a lot of people. He could do a better job, especially with the salary that he's getting paid and with the type of recruits he's bringing in to the University of Texas. If he can't produce in the next couple of years a couple of really good, strong teams that go deep, at least 2 or 3 rounds deep in the tournament, Coach Rick Barnes is going to be in the big hot seat come next year or even before next year ends. So for Texas, a lot of questions that need to be answered still, but all in all, it was a pretty good year. And yes, it ended disappointingly. That was a tough call for Texas to endure, the fact that they essentially got jobbed on a 5-second call there that was non-existent, a phantom 5-second call. But regardless, Texas played good this year, but they didn't play well enough to make a deep enough tournament run. As they always say, there's always next year. For Texas, though, truer words could not be said. (2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005). Was it really that hard?